Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of NextCast, a podcast by the Next Generation Group where we listen to the leaders of today and get their insights on business and technology. This is your host, Samar Jain, and today we have with us Mr. Dima Steesy. Dima earned a bachelor's degree with honors from Harvard University, which he attended on the GI Bill. He is the veteran of the United States Navy and an Eagle Scout. Moreover, he is a great entrepreneur who has established a successful skincare brand which is known for its vegan, cruelty free, and toxin free products. He has also served as chief of staff at FinDocs, a $30 million venture backed fintech company in Los Angeles. Currently, he is the founder of Humble Motors, a technology company that is developing the world's first solar powered SUVs. We're delighted to have you with us, Dima, and thank you so much for sparing your time.
Thanks for having me, Summer. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, great. So for the next 30, 45 minutes, Dima, I will be asking you questions, which revolve around your life and which really ask you how how the phases of your life and your experiences in the Navy and building and developing the companies have, really shaped you as a person. So my first question goes like that. You had a pretty diverse life, professionally, because you were first into the Navy, then you went to pursue a bachelor's in liberal arts, and then you set up a skincare brand, and now finally you are into automobile and technology. We want you to walk us through these phases of your life and, exactly tell us how they have developed you as a person and what each of them has taught you.
I think my life will probably sound similar, my background at least, to a lot of entrepreneurs who try a lot of different things, sometimes out of curiosity, sometimes out of trying to solve problems, sometimes out of necessity. And so I think for my life in particular, I grew up, I was an orphan in Russia. I was adopted at 4 years old by American parents. And so moved to the US, was raised in New Hampshire, kind of had a very normal childhood. Um, and I was always entrepreneurial. Even as a kid, I was always thinking of ways to start small businesses. I started like a rare coin collection with some friends, and we didn't really sell that rare of a coin, but we thought the quarters and different things we found from like the 1960s or 1980s, oh, maybe we could sell this for $2 or something. Even as a kid, I think I was entrepreneurial and trying to think of ways to make money, to hustle. So I don't know, that nurture versus nature debate. I don't know how much of entrepreneurialism is engineers working on submarines. It's something that I reflect on a lot now, trying to lead a business, that not taking things personally when you're meeting with investors or you're trying to make sales or you're working in business development, you get a lot of rejection and you get a lot of no's. And if you've been in the military and been screamed at, for 4 years, you come away with that with a very low ego. And I think that low ego, that humility, that ability to just kind of keep it moving, despite the criticism, despite the rejection, I think it will make you a stronger leader and probably a stronger person as well. So I did the military for 4 years. When I got out, I went to Harvard on the GI Bill. When I was in school, I started a skincare brand. I didn't know it at the time that it was going to turn into a brand, but it was really started with one moisturizer that sold really well online, and it kind of grew from there to a team of 10 people. We were doing $400,000 a month online on our Shopify store, and we sold moisturizers, serums, different facial products, hand moisturizers. We incorporated jojoba, which is like a desert shrub found in New Mexico that not many skincare brands were using jojoba, and incorporating those ingredients into skincare. So, it got a little bit of attention because it was cruelty free and toxin free back in 2016 when that wasn't really as in vogue as it is now. So I sold those formulas, gosh, 2 summers ago already, and then kind of tried a lot of different business ideas, a lot more bad ideas than good, I will admit. So I tried like an Uber for returns startup where you could use an app and someone would come to your home and make like a retail return for you. So either go to the post office or go to the actual store and make the return for you. Um, and tried a number of different things. And I first started working on Humble Motors last October, and it originally started as an idea when I had a Tesla Model 3, and it originally started as sitting in traffic wondering why I'm sitting in Los Angeles in an hour under this like glaring sunlight. Why can't a Tesla have a solar roof? And so the idea originally started as, could we build like an aftermarket car part that would be able to take that solar energy and convert it into electricity? And so almost like a tuner that we could put over a car, over an electric vehicle. And that really evolved from that kind of thought to, even better than just a car part would be, could we build a photovoltaic integrated car? So like an entire electric vehicle that is more self-sufficient than other electric vehicles that could extend the range 30 plus miles a day just based on solar energy. So that's kind of how that idea started. That's what I'm doing now, and it's probably the biggest project that I've ever undertaken, probably the biggest I will ever undertake. But it's exciting. It's one of those things where uh, all these little things that have happened in my life almost feel like it's kind of leading me to this of trying to make a difference in the field of mobility and trying to organize a group of people behind this mission. So I'm just super excited to be here and doing this.
Yeah, that's great. That's a perfect entrepreneur story because many of these entrepreneurs go through a lot, and these different phases train them to become what they are today. And that's exactly what you have done. You have changed a lot, and you have changed a lot of fields, and you have tried upon a lot of ideas, and you're still developing. So that's great. My second question leads on that developing the world's first solar powered car and then setting up a market chain for it is an ambitious vision in terms of both technology and management, because we already have a lot of competitors out there, and there were some previous attempts on solar powered cars, but they weren't so successful. So it's really a very big and ambitious vision. What was your real intent behind starting Humble? As you just said, it was a simple idea, but how do you really saw it in starting? Was it something personal or a logical opportunity? And what gives you that motivation every day to continue working on that vision?
I'll answer your second question first, if that's okay. So, what motivates me is that I genuinely believe that solar is the future. I think it's not only the future of mobility, but I think a solar electric future is the future of our infrastructure and our power grid, and really how the world will move and operate down the road. Um, I'm not sure if people are aware of this who are listening to this podcast, but solar could power the world many times over if you had enough battery capacity to pair with it. Many times, like 1,000 times over. The amount of energy that reaches the Earth from the sun is staggeringly high. So the way I look at it is we have this massive fusion generator in the sky that is lobbing out vast amounts of energy. And I'm talking about just using land area. It's amazing. So if you take like a nuclear plant in the United States and you compare its current output to just putting solar panels on the land, the square foot area used by the nuclear power plant, and usually they have a pretty big keep out zone because you have about maybe 5 kilometers or so where you can't build homes or commercial spaces or anything. So let's say you put solar panels in those 5 kilometers of area, those solar panels will generate more power than the nuclear plant that was sitting there. So if you do a little math, 1 square kilometer is 1 million square meters, and 1 kilowatt per square meter, and there's like 1 kilowatt about per square meter of solar energy. So in 1 square kilometer, we have a gigawatt of solar energy. So for the United States, we could take about a 200 square kilometer space, so maybe like a corner of Utah or something, 200 square kilometers, and we could power the United States if we put solar panels there. So I look at solar thinking we have all of this energy coming from the sun. How can we capture this in a way to be able to make us move? Electric vehicles are a good start because we are running into a lot of issues with electric vehicles right now where the more electric vehicles are getting made, the more people are realizing that we do not have the charging infrastructure for them. So if you think about a place like California, where we have a lot of chargers and we have a lot of electric vehicles, in California, we have to build 1,500 charging points every day to keep up with the demand for electric vehicles and the anticipated demand, mostly because we only have like a 1.5 million electric vehicles running around right now. By 2030, they think it's going to be 17 million electric vehicles. So any technology, any manufacturer that is working on more self-sufficient electric vehicles is going to help leapfrog that charging grid. It will be incredibly scalable. You could introduce electric vehicles to markets in India, for example, or Africa or Asia, where maybe there's a very limited charging infrastructure, or maybe just the cost of it. So Tesla spends more than $300,000 on each supercharger. And so the ability to kind of have this low cost, extremely scalable electric vehicle, it would change mobility. So the Humble One, which is our concept SUV, um, it has about a 2.5 kilowatt hour solar array. And if you're doing the math and you asked about, other cars have done this to different extents, and you're right, there's been vehicles that they have a really tiny square footage, maybe like just part of the roof or something, and maybe they're running like the air conditioning or something like ancillary, like off the solar power. But if you have a 2.5 kilowatt solar system, in ideal conditions, so that would be like south facing, 6 hours of daily sunlight, you're getting about 3,400 kilowatts over the year. And that's assuming like 20% efficient panels, which we can talk about like efficiency for solar panels too, because that's a exciting topic in terms of talk about technology and technological advances. In 1960, in our parents' generation, solar panels were only about 6% efficient. Now, commercially available, pretty easy for you and I to get, we can get about 20% efficient pretty easily. In labs, they're making 30%. Toyota just came out with or they're developing a solar panel that they say is about 34% efficient. So it's just the technology is incredible in terms of the leaps and bounds we've made in the last 30 years. But um, 3,400 kilowatt hours per year and about a 4 mile per hour or mile per kilowatt hour efficiency rating is about 13,000 miles per year. And so with our solar system, our estimate is that in those sort of ideal conditions, you could have a potential of about 37 plus miles per day. Um, Now, is this enough to like power your car for so you could just drive forever? No. Is this a truly self-sufficient vehicle? No, there is a battery. You can plug it in just like any other electric vehicle. But having this ability to extend your range based on a renewable resource that's available in all parts of the world, the sun, I think is the next step to creating a self-sufficient electric vehicle. And that's why we're working really, really hard to make this a reality.
Yeah, it definitely is. Really, when you talked about the power of solar energy, that's extremely, extremely amazing. And once we move around and we have better receptors, we have better efficiency in the solar receptors. I think really this is a great step ahead because, as you said, charging infrastructure it's going to be very tough in India because
Mm,
I know it's going to be tough here and it's going to be tough in the other parts of the world when we talk about developing countries, even
mhm,
though I strongly believe that it's easier to get charging infrastructure in the United States where it's a pretty
mhm,
strong economy and they have some powerful companies which are leading the way. But when it comes to developing countries, when it comes to you know government and private
mhm,
companies joining hands with government, I think it's going to be a really, really tough job for charging infrastructures. And when we have these self-sufficient cars, that would be amazing. Even though we won't have them in 5 years, 6 years,
mhm.
and even if we make a step towards that, it's really stepping towards future. So that's amazing.
Well,
I
can I ask you, like in terms of electric vehicles that you see in India now, do you see, and I apologize for my ignorance, I'm genuinely curious, but do you see like Teslas where you are? Is there a charging infrastructure to speak of?
To be very honest, Tesla just entered like 2 months back. Tesla
Okay.
entered into negotiations with Indian government. So really, we do not have any Tesla on road in India. We do not have a manufacturing of Tesla in here in India. We are
Mm,
just into dealings with Tesla, and we are hoping that Tesla might come in India in the coming 5 6 months. But
mm-hmm,
to be very honest, if we look at the ground reality, uh, we do not even have proper petrol pumps in India when it talks about
mm,
rural cities. And when we talk about coming with electric vehicles and the charging infrastructure, most probably we would just have electric vehicle. The whole charging in the petrol pump itself, in the installed in the petrol pump itself, because making it separately might cost us a lot, and
mm-hmm,
Tesla or any other e-vehicle company which steps up in India might get into negotiations with some big oil companies and have their charging port installed in the petrol pumps. That's what I have heard. Some of my friends whose fathers own a petrol pump, they know that that's
mm-hmm,
going to happen. And but it's really tough when we talk about electric vehicles, and especially about Tesla, and when it comes to all those autopilot. I would
mm-hmm,
say that India also lacks a little bit when it comes to the road infrastructure. So we don't have it
mm,
as smooth as it is in the United States. And we definitely couldn't take a chance with autopilot.
mm,
So it's going to
mm-hmm,
be tough also when it comes to the clearance of the car, and it comes to the it comes to how well we can navigate with the cars. It's really tough for that happening in India because of the lack of infrastructure when it comes to roads, and
mm-hmm,
also because of and also I think it will be pretty hard when it comes that Tesla join hands with governments, because that's what they have to do anyways. Because I
yeah,
don't think they will just enter into India like they have done in United States and make it on their own. And when it happens with government, of course there's a bit of delay. Of course there's a
mm-hmm,
bit of corruption going on, and
mm,
that's when it becomes a whole propaganda. So
mm,
that's my take
mm-hmm.
over that.
That's fascinating because you know, I electric vehicle adoption and the hesitancy for people to move to electric vehicles is something I'm very interested in. And even in the United States, there's, a huge segment of the population in the United States that does not live near that does not live near a charging point. And so if we look at electric vehicle adoption, we say, hey, we need to have more electric vehicles on the road if we want a carbon neutral future. Um, there's steps that we have to take, I think, to make that adoption easier. And the charging infrastructure piece, you're exactly right. Like not only in India and developing markets around the world, but even here in the United States, sort of, middle America, all the all the people who live in places other than like the coastal cities, like in New York or San Francisco or Los Angeles, where I live, there's huge segments of the population that are being left out. And the other problem with charging infrastructure is we're still getting 85% of our electricity from fossil fuels.
Yeah.
So if you tell me, hey, we're charging our car, that's great. My next question is, where is that electricity coming from? And so I think as more people realize that energy from the sun and us building the necessary infrastructure and batteries to be able to capture that energy and convert that into electricity, until we do that and start seriously thinking about like renewable energy, I think electric vehicles are going to face um, it's a dilemma for them. It's going to be a really big dilemma for them.
Yeah, because if the electricity itself comes from the fossil fuels, then really it's not a takeover. Because
Hmm.
and in fact it's a disadvantage because we have a mediator now, electricity. Otherwise, we were having an actual efficiency. But Definitely.
Hmm.
Then I think solar powered, or if it comes to other source like hydro, wind,
Hmm.
and all these unconventional sources of energy, they would really need to step up and take a part, because otherwise it's not going to happen. I've heard
Hmm.
from the chief executive officers and CMOs of big oil companies, be it
Hmm.
British Petroleum or Reliance here in India. Everyone says that although we are oil companies, we realize that down the line, 5, 10 years, oil is not really the source which will, run the world. We have to
Hmm.
see somewhere else. And
Hmm.
I think Humble is really doing a step up into that. My
Hmm.
question next to you is that you did a bachelor in liberal arts, and the field of e-vehicles, and really what we are talking about is everything about technology. How
Hmm.
did you start off with the idea and prototyping at first? Did you
Hmm.
self-learn a lot of automobile engineering, in order to make Humble a success, or is it really your team which is going behind?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's where do you get the nerve to do this? It's a good
Yeah,
question. Um, what I'll say is two things. If you look at people like Henry Ford, the business magnate, founded Ford Motor Company here, he wasn't an engineer either. He didn't know how to read blueprints. Instead, he was a curious guy who always loved. Uh, Machines and taking things apart. In his day, it was like timepieces and watches. When he was like a boy, neighbors would bring him like watches and things to fix. And he would take, all 14 pieces apart and put it back together again. That sort of problem solving, ingenuity, creative thinking, and critical thinking, I think, are almost more helpful for an entrepreneur at that stage than a sort of like technical degree, right? Or like a PhD.
yeah,
Having someone who is as strong as a problem solver and who's able to find the technical leaders they need, I think is going to be important for any electric vehicle maker. And so with us, for example, I don't come from a science background. I come from the background of someone who has started and worked and grown successful consumer brands. I've been able to connect with consumers about different products. And I come from someone who loves vehicles and loves the earth and wants to make more sustainable vehicles. In terms of the team, that's like critical. And I would say that, for any young person, it sounds like this podcast is really geared, towards young people who are interested in technology and science, and possibly business. Finding the right people is so critical to any project, to any mission. Even setting up a podcast, you have different people, right, on your team
yeah.
who are each fulfilling different functions and supporting different functions. Leveraging people's strengths, identifying the talent is so critically important. And so, for me as an entrepreneur, when I started this company, I immediately sought out people who were a lot smarter than me, which in my case isn't terribly difficult to do. So that worked that worked out well. But people who could raise the bar in terms of their work product, in terms of their critical thinking, in terms of their network and background that they bring, never underestimate someone's network. Maybe they don't know the answer, but hey, they've worked for 20 years at Ford Motors, and maybe they know someone who knows the answer. And so that sort of philosophy of getting a small, nimble, scrappy, low ego, and incredibly intelligent, driven team um, is, I think, why we've gotten the traction we've gotten so far. Which, by the way, for only starting in October, we have almost, I think, as of this morning, like 285 reservations. We were featured in GQ France, Car and Driver, Rob Report. Um, those 285 reservations, that it's about, I think, 25-30 million dollars in reserved pre-orders. So you can see why this is way beyond me. This is way beyond Dima. This is, I think, people believe that solar is the future. They're happy with the progress we've made in terms of our design, our simulations, our calculations, and they want to see us build a prototype. We have a lot of things to prove and test out, and we'll continue growing our team as we try to prove out our calculations. It's a really exciting time, right, at Humble Motors to be kind of in the first we're just passing the 6 month mark here. It's a really exciting time.
Yeah, that's amazing. And uh, also, when it comes to team, uh, how did you start building the team? Like, sometimes
Mhm.
we do it after we have taken up the vision, or sometimes we actually make a team before we have started it. So, we have an
Mhm.
estimate of how it's going to happen. And even though you have a good team, I'm pretty sure that, when you talk about these stats, you have also studied a lot about automobile engineering or learned it
Mhm.
from your team itself. So, how did you do that self learning? How,
Mhm.
because it takes a lot. Even when we have a teacher, we won't study. So studying on
Yeah.
its own, and that too when we are in an earning stage. So
Mhm.
how does that happen?
Yeah, it's a great question. I, you know, one thing that I have found that I really enjoy doing, and when I talk to my entrepreneur friends, I find similar stories. We all love reading. Um, and so constantly reading different books about history. By the way, history will tell you a great deal about the future, right? So if you learn about Lucid Motors and Polestar and Karma Motors and Nikola and Tesla, and you learn about their history and what they did and what sort of early challenges they faced, those are all incredible lessons that, hey, maybe you don't have enough capital or the right team to be able to address those challenges right away, but you're essentially getting like a free MBA, right? You're reading
Yeah.
case studies essentially by learning about the history of these other electric vehicle automakers. And there is so much free knowledge out there. There's probably millions of hours on YouTube of different people talking about different stages and different elements of companies. Maybe they were interviewed for a TED Talk. Maybe they're doing a podcast like we're doing now. So, for people who are interested in starting something, I'd start there. Think about the sort of people or brands or businesses that you've looked up to. Learn about what sort of technology did they develop? What does their intellectual portfolio look like? What sort of patents did they file for? What sort of leaders did they have, and where did their leaders come from? Those are all really critical questions to just keep in the back of your mind as you build out your own vision.
That's super amazing. And, really, it's a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people in the lead says that, a degree doesn't matter right now. Everything you want is online. Everything
Hmm.
you want is there in books. And literally, education is free now.
Yeah.
Literally what you go to college is to have a college experience. and
Hmm.
uh, and when it comes to COVID, it has actually made everything online. So although
Hmm.
there are downsides of COVID, I would literally say that it has done a wonders when it comes to education, because there are a lot of free educational resources out there. And someone who is not willing to pay the college fees can still make a decent
Hmm.
amount of money just learning out of internet. So you just have to have the ambition and you will do it. So that's great. uh, my next question goes about is that, as we all know, that there are a lot of competitors in the EV market, and some of them have really established themselves in the United States and even in the other parts of the world. What do you think might be a selling point for Humble, which will differentiate it from others and set it through the competition? Because, as you said, right now it's a concept SUV. It might come over by 2025, you have reservations. And by that time, the competition in the EV market would also grow. So, in terms of management, in terms of technology, in terms of availability, how is Humble trying to, get through the competition, and what they are looking at when they launch the vehicle for the consumers?
Yeah, so it's a great point. Electric vehicles are super hot right now, and there are a number of competitors. The one point that I would make to your point is that the way I look at it from my perspective, Tesla is the only electric vehicle manufacturer that has been able to successfully volume manufacture in out of electric vehicles in the United States. So if you see, Rivian or Lucid or some of these other competitors, they've built prototypes. They have partnerships and manufacturing pipelines in place. But in terms of volume manufacturing, it's a whole different game. Building the prototype is almost like a fun exercise for them, and then saying, okay, now we have to make 100,000 of these every quarter. That's a whole different game. And so not only is the market competitive, but there's also going to be even more competition in terms of actual volume manufacturing. And so that's the piece I'll say, that I look at the prototype, even though that seems like the goalpost, I view that as more of like the center line. That once we build the prototype, we still have a long road ahead of us for volume manufacturing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. Because,
Hmm.
prototype is something, in fact, we would like to say that our company here, we actually made a prototype for a F1 car to have in India. And we were working on it for a while, and
Hmm.
our company had made it possible. But we are not McLaren Motors, and we
Hmm.
haven't really got our, things on the road. And that's a
Hmm.
big thing, because getting a prototype is one thing, mass
Hmm.
producing it is other, then marketing
Hmm.
it is whole lot different. So I think you say it is a center line. I think prototype is just the starting. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
way to make it. And I think right now when you are in the fundraising part, you know it better. So I would really think that the market is going to be high, but
Hmm.
solar is something, as you explained, that is the major differentiating point for Humble. And even
Hmm.
if more solar powered e-vehicle companies come in, if you make a first move, I think that's all about it. So that's absolutely great. How has your fundraising round been? And at the end of this year, at the end of 2 years, 3 years,
Hmm.
what are you looking at? What sort of firms you're looking at? And what might be a threshold amount that you would say, okay, I've got this much fund, and now I'm really up to setting manufacturing hubs where I can, make a
Hmm.
way through it, and we can start marketing and producing our cars.
So we're in the midst of raising a seed round right now. And so unfortunately, I can't really just legally can't go into too many specifics about
Yeah,
fundraising until we
yeah,
close the seed round. But what I would say generally, for electric vehicle makers, is it will probably not surprise you to learn that starting a car company is incredibly capital intensive. It takes a lot of money. And I think about something like Tesla. So Tesla unveiled their semi in 2017, I think, or 2018, early 2018. And it's now, 3 years later, 4 years later, and they still have not started volume manufacturing the Tesla semi. Tesla has an incredible amount of talent, incredible amount of intellectual horsepower, an incredible amount of money, um, and they haven't been able to start volume manufacturing yet. So that gives you a sense of really the resources, both in terms of talent, engineers, as well as capital that you need to do it. So I will say, in terms of our roadmap, we look at building the solar roof and patenting all of the different technologies that are going into this car. So not only is there a roof, but there's also electricity generating side lights, there's regenerative braking, there's solar paint, basically, that will be on the body of the car. So there's all these different technologies that we need to patent. And we feel that once we build a working roof and patent this technology, that we'd be able to successfully raise like a Series A and explore going public in different ways. So you're probably familiar with like SPACs. So a number of electric vehicle makers have gone public via SPAC. in the
Yeah.
previous year or two at different stages of their journey. Some don't even have a prototypes on the road. Some did, and so once we're able to develop our IP portfolio more, and build a working roof, we think that that's, in terms of time wise, 1 to 3 years from now, then that will probably be when we're able to raise a pretty significant amount of money in order to begin manufacturing.
That's great. And when it will really start, then also some challenges might come. It's just not that we have started it. So yeah, even after starting, companies fail, and there are sometimes defaults in the production line. Sometimes even if your product is too damn good, sometimes it doesn't work. And we have seen it with Tesla. There was a time which Elon Musk talked so openly about that his both of his companies were dying, and really they were in single digit numbers of exhaustion. So I think when
Mhm.
something like Tesla, which started so back, is now something so established, can face something like that, there's no surprise, or there's no running from the fact that it could happen with anyone. And
Mhm.
I think uh, you're young enough to hold
Yeah.
all those challenges. So I just trust upon you. And midway
You know
to talk,
the funny thing about Tesla, and one reason why I really look up to Elon Musk, is at his heart, he's a problem solver. Um, and that sort of innovation and invention of trying to figure out new ways to solve old problems, like that's why Tesla is successful. A lot of these other electric vehicle makers, um, in some ways, we're all trying to catch up to Tesla, right? That
yeah,
they have this sort of innovation and inventive visionary at their forefront, and in many ways, we're kind of all in their dust, and are looking up to Tesla and to Elon Musk in different ways. So, I mean, I'm a huge fan of his, and I love that you brought up that story that a lot of entrepreneurs, and particularly in the auto industry, they don't use their own money. They use other people's money. Um, and Elon Musk is an example where he used his own money, and a
yeah.
lot of his own money, in order to try to get this off the ground. And even from the Roadster days back in 2003, 2004, to now, I mean, it is incredible. And I think it's just witness to the fact that don't copy what everyone else is doing. Back in 2003, 2004, you may be too young to remember this, but there were laptops that had lithium batteries in them, and the media was running stories almost like nightly, it seemed like, of these like laptops exploding. And so Tesla ran into a pretty big PR problem pretty quickly when people said, wait a second, we're going to put the exploding battery inside of a vehicle. Like how is that going to work? And despite the criticism, despite the naysayers, e- Elon Musk, I think, saw electric vehicles and saw the future. And by the way, if you're ever interested, read some of Elon's early writings about solar power in like 2006, 2007. He quite literally writes about um, how Tesla's mission, in some ways, was to move to a more solar electric economy. Um, and that was back in 2006. So, um, his beliefs and convictions in solar power make a lot of sense to me. And his kind of status as a visionary and inventor, I think, is a huge reason why Tesla is so valuable today.
Even if you talk about Elon Musk, he goes through a lot of wild ideas, I would say, as every entrepreneur does.
Yeah.
Literally, he's looking for Mars, and these are really ambitious ideas. And I think solar powered cars is really an ambitious one too, because but it's practical in the way you say it.
Hmm.
It's practical, and it should actually be done, because if we keep manufacturing electricity from fossil fuels, really we need
Hmm.
to reevaluate, are we doing any
Yeah.
progress? But if we talk about self-sustainable cars, that's amazing. And
Hmm.
that's how I move on to my next question. That you are in the struggling round right now, when it comes to fundraising, when it comes to prototyping. I asked, what is your uh, work hours per week?
uh, it's kind of my life. Uh, that probably makes me sound like a loser, but this is my
No.
life. I wake up, check emails. I start doing this. We have so much inbound interest from potential investors, from potential reservation holders, from people who have questions about it, from critics who spend 30 minutes writing a very long email about why we will fail. And by the way, to anyone listening to this podcast who has critics, as someone who has faced that and is facing a lot of them with his current project, what I will say is that it takes zero courage, zero bravery, and frankly, zero intelligence to tell a startup founder that they will fail.
Yeah.
you know, like statistically speaking, they have the odds on their side, right? It doesn't take a brave person or an ingenious person to say that. And what I really love is the number of people who have come forward and said, "Hey, have you thought about doing this?" Or "Super interesting idea. Can you share more?" Or those are the sort of people that you want in your corner. Not yes men, not people who just say, "Yep, this is brilliant. This will change the world. You do you." You want people who really thoughtfully and critically evaluate your ideas, maybe propose and or challenge your propositions or basic thesis, and you operate from that perspective. So I kind of veered off from like how many hours I work to go on that aside, but it's important, I think, and in the electric vehicle industry particularly, there is a lot of competition, and in the end, the nice thing is that more than one of us can win,
Yeah.
right? That we're all working towards a better planet. We want our children to have a better planet, and so in the end, I think there needs to be a spirit of sort of cooperation, collaboration, because I think for the most part we all are working towards the same mission. But hours wise, I haven't counted. So I get paid, $0 for this at this point. So
Yeah.
I have no reason to count, my hours. I'm not submitting like a timesheet to myself or anything, but it's a lot. I mean, it's it's wake up to go to bed.
And does this podcast count in your work hours? We're sure you're
Yeah,
having fun here.
I'll send you an invoice later.
That's okay. We are also a startup, so please understand, Dima. uh, and one thing which I find might be a challenge for solar powered cars is definitely they're going to be more expensive than a normal
Yeah,
e-vehicle because of the installation of a solar panel.
yeah,
And when we talk about the normal consumer, really
yeah.
the idea right now is not I want to save the world, it's I want to save my money. So
Yeah,
how will you, either bring changes in your model to make it cheap and affordable, or how will you, change the consumer base to understand that really what you're going through is a valuable product and you should invest in
it's a great question. So the Humble One concept SUV is priced at $109,000, excluding taxes and options. Um, that's out of reach for, I would say, the vast majority of people. Um, the two thoughts kind of philosophically about that. One is uh, technology, research, development of sort of new photovoltaic technology is expensive. And even if you think of like the first Tesla Roadster, 2003, 2004, that was like $114,000 or something. One of the reasons lithium was incredibly expensive to extract and manufacture in terms of the batteries and creating the batteries. They've brought down the price of lithium by a ton by just finding more efficient ways to extract it and more efficient ways to manufacture it, their batteries. So I'll say that to say, uh, this is our first product. The hope would be that as our technology develops, that we would be able to build more efficient solar panels for less money. down the road. The other piece I'll say is that this is an SUV crossover. And so if you think of the sort of like luxury crossover market, like a Range Rover Sport or the Tesla Model Y, and you add $20,000-$30,000 of solar panels and solar tech to it, you get to about our price point. And so I mentioned that to say that our hope would be that we could venture into other product categories. So think sedans, think campers and RVs. There's a number of different products that we could venture into at varying price points that still incorporate solar technology. I, I had a reporter asked me a funny question the other day, and they asked me if I was planning on ever doing a convertible. And I was thinking about the solar roof with a convertible, and I was like, I'm not sure exactly. Yeah, I'm not sure we could do a convertible, but pretty much every other product, I think we could take a stab at some point in the future.
Yes, but I think even if the prices are a little high than what it is for a normal EV vehicles, I would still
Mhm,
go for it because you literally don't have to worry about the paying out for electricity that much. You have a
mhm,
generator at your roof. So I
mhm,
think the people who are buying those Tesla charging ports for their house itself to install in their house, I think that also costs a lot. And if
mhm.
my car is saving that, it's becoming
Well,
self-sustainable. I think that's
mhm.
it.
I love that you mentioned that because in the United States, so in California, there's like a federal. So when you fill up you go to the gas station, there's taxes, right? So the government taxes gas, and I think it's in California. I think the federal government, it's like an 18-cent tax. The state of California is about like a 54-cent tax per gallon. So you're adding, I think, almost 60, 70 cents per gallon. In general, in Europe and the United States, the government has not started charging electric charging points. Uh, what makes sense and what's kind of on the horizon for them at some point, though, is to start charging and to start taxing
Yeah,
on that. And electric vehicle owners and manufacturers are going to be in for potentially rude shock down the road. It would appear if the government does start taxing for charging. So I look at like a more self-sufficient electric vehicle like the Humble One, and I think, wow, not only is it theoretically cheaper, right? Because you're not having to build charging points or install charging residential charging points for even the $300,000 superchargers, that like Tesla has in Santa Monica. On top of
yeah,
that, if the government and municipalities start getting involved in taxing that electricity output, uh, there's going to be even more cost savings for someone who has like a self-sufficient electric vehicle. So I think all signs are pointed, towards that, and a lot of EV owners it's going to be a little bit shocking, I think.
yeah. It's going to be, and yeah, all points correct. I think then the price you have to pay for a solar-powered vehicle is worth it, and you should definitely go for it. So moving on, as you say, this is your life, and this has literally become a vision for you, a burning ambition for you. How do you think you make out time for your personal life, your hobbies? I saw you are into music.
Hmm.
I'm also into music, and you're into a
Hmm.
lot of readings. And I'm pretty sure when someone is into books, he's definitely not all into studies. He is into literature,
Hmm.
he's into different things. So, how do you make time for your personal self? How do you make time for your family, your friends? And how do you go with this work life balance?
Well, COVID was kind of a disruptor to, to a lot of people's work-life balance, right? Like even the normal grabbing coffee, with friends every once in a while that you haven't seen in a bit, even those have ended, so in terms of carving out work-life balance, I've never really liked that description, because you shouldn't be balancing life with anything. Know? Like your life is all you have, and we get, I believe we get one of these. And so when I think of work and what I've done, um, I have tried really, really hard to make my efforts seem as least like work as possible. Um, and it sounds corny, but it's true. That if you genuinely enjoy what you're doing, if you're somehow able to pay the rent by doing something that you enjoy, which that that's a whole nother conversation about how to make that work. But if you're able to combine those two things, it becomes part of your life. And a well balanced life, involves seeing your friends, seeing your family, exercising. Because I was in the military, exercise is still incredibly important to me. I think every entrepreneur actually should should think about meditating, breath work, exercising, because they've done studies in terms of like elasticity in the brain and neurological studies, and the healthiest, strongest people mentally are the ones who have incorporated some sort of physical activity in their life. So I find that incredibly important. I'm happy to hear you like music too. I grew up playing the piano, and one of the first things my parents did was buy me a keyboard and sign me up for piano lessons like once a week. And I kind of disliked the lessons as a kid because it's like more homework, and what kid wants more what kid wants more homework? But learning to play an instrument, it helps with a lot of different things. They've even done studies in terms of capacity to learn new languages, mathematical ability, and being able to read music. There's some really interesting parallels there. So I love music. You've probably seen, I've dabbled in producing, music of my own, which has been just a fun hobby for me and something that enriches my life a lot. So, um, if I if I had my way, um, I would be able to survive on like 3 hours of sleep and be able to like work and live the rest. But I'm not. I've heard of like CEOs, and I think like I heard Jeff Bezos like gets by on like 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night, and that's not me. I need my 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep a night, and then I just get right back to it.
That's great. After all of your experience, after all of your vision there, and everything, might be you're young, but you have had a lot of experience. And this makes me to the last question. What might be the your best advice for the future entrepreneurs, and which field would you advise them to enter?
Oh, uh, um, y- that's a great, question. I'm not sure if I'm the best person to answer because I feel like in many ways I'm still learning, right, how to be a
Yeah.
better entrepreneur and a better person. But in general, I would say for people who want to be entrepreneurs, um, don't stick like your finger to the wind and try to figure out which direction the wind is blowing and what's going to be the next big popular thing. I think you genuinely have to look for real problems in your life. So maybe it's you have a moisturizer that you hate and it makes your skin all oily. So you say, hey, I want to create a new moisturizer that works. Or maybe you're sitting in traffic and waiting in line at a charger for an hour in California to charge your electric vehicle. And you say, I want to find out a better way to make an electric vehicle. So finding real problems in your life and then trying to figure out a way to solve those problems, I think that's going to be, if nothing else, it's going to be a rewarding activity and exercise for you. If you can make it work out, it can also be a monetarily and commercially viable opportunity and product as well. But if nothing else, personally, it's going to be rewarding that you identified a problem and you try to solve it. And as an entrepreneur, that's a big picture thing. The small picture thing is when you're the CEO of a company or an entrepreneur, or really in any sort of leadership position, or you're growing in your career, you have to understand that 99% of your day is solving small problems. You're you're not sitting there generally on podcasts giving advice for 12 hours a day. Instead, it's solving really, really small problems. Like, for example, The seatbelts. We thought the seatbelts were going to cost X, and now we found out that they're going to cost 2XX. You know, um, and small problems like that. Trying to figure those out. They're not sexy. They're not fun, but they've got to be solved. So that ability to problem solve and find the right people around you, I think, is would help any entrepreneur.
That's great. Uh, I think this has been the best conversation, and I'm really thankful, Dima. You made time, and I hope you had fun here with us.
This was so much fun. You know, to be honest, this is the first podcast interview I've done. And so we can look back at this and no pressure for us, but if we felt like it went well, then we can keep doing more of these. If it didn't go
Yeah,
well,
definitely.
then we'll never speak
No,
of this
this
again.
went
And
pretty well. I have recorded a few podcasts, and I can say you this went pretty well. So
I think so too. This was a lot of fun. This was a lot of fun.
yeah, and if I am being your marketing guy, sure, we will go for another podcast. Okay.
I
Uh,
like it.
Thank you for tuning in today. See you in the next episode. Until then, stay motivated, believe in yourself, and keep listening to NextCast.